أول شيء رمضان كريم. Hello everyone. Thank you for joining. I want to keep the session today casual لأنه this is the first time I'm doing this, and realistically we're all doing it out of our house. فالموضوع يكون شوية غريب إنه يكون formal. But also the topic itself, talking about cultivating your authentic voice, which is to do with vulnerability, شوي صعب إنه يكون الموضوع formal. So during the session لو في أحد عنده أسئلة, I think Muhammad will see the hand. So let's keep this interactive. I just want to start by telling everyone how this started. So Muhammad and I connected a while back, and we were talking about how to start a first session مع بعض. And since we wanted, inshallah, to have more of these sessions, we thought about starting from the core and the beginning of all things. فأشياء في design, like processes, procedures, these are all details. However, the core of design to me is having an authentic voice. And with the industry now, because of the internet and social media, there's so many designers, architects, designers, decorators. There's so many trendsetters. There's so many things that I think it's become, I think design somehow, Muhammad, has become diluted. So everybody is doing everything. And so somehow with more and more people coming to the scene, and I feel that there is a loss of what one could consider an authentic voice. And so
yes, it's actually it's the main topic is at the end, the authentic voice thing is related to our identity, our passion, how we started it, and why we are doing it. And I believe your practical experience, mashallah, the long practical experience, will tell us how maybe the best practices to reach there, or at least to understand the methodology that we have to follow to reach there.
Okay, now I always like to start my talks with Jalaluddin Rumi for some reason. So I'll start with a saying, but I think if you note this one down, it is like a summary of the whole lecture. Rumi says, either appear as you are or be as you appear. Because they're two completely different things, that we are something, but we appear as something else. Or we appear as, now I'll get it mixed up. But okay, so either appear as you are or be as you appear, or what you want to be. Now, I want to make clear that an authentic voice is not a business-related thing. In business, that you differentiate yourself in the market is called what you would call a value proposition. What are the services that you can provide a client that are very unique? And that is business related. That has nothing to do with self. Mm-hmm. So you could be a very successful person in the market and a designer offering a certain service that nobody else has, and it's very unique. But that has nothing to do, I believe, with self-fulfillment and finding yourself. An authentic voice is much more related of revealing who you are as a person and how you relate that to your work and how you make it part of your work. So it becomes like losing the horizon line. It becomes two of the same. And so I'll give you, for those who don't maybe know me, I'll give a short introduction. That my name is Soonia عاشور. Maybe as you know, I'm from Saudi Arabia. And as a company, we focus on designing cultural and sovereign projects. So we design embassies, ambassador residences. We work with the Saudi Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We work with different cultural ministries. And we also work with UNESCO. And so we, for example, designed the Bahrain, or let's say the Arab Regional Center for World Heritage in Bahrain. And we just now signed, for example, with Jeddah Historic District, the UNESCO site of Beit Nasif. So this is the dry company profile of what we do. Why do we do it? And the why factor, I think, becomes part of the stepping stones of finding an authentic voice. As designers, it would be a given that you create value, and that you create, how can I say this, that there is a purpose to what you do. So first we have to have the purpose anyway, but then why we do this. So in my case, for me to be in culture, I care about promoting our story, our lost history. And on a personal note, I care to promote Islamic art because it's a global language. And I work with designers and artists that also are interested and inspired by Islamic art. So this is a kind of, let's say, an introduction of what I do. But I would like to take you, let's say, on a journey of how I actually came to this. And I want to start, and the reason for this is I had people who follow me on Instagram, people who I taught at one point in my life, my clients. So everyone knows kind of what I do, they like what I do, but nobody really knows, where did this come from? How did I get to this point?
I believe this, what we are doing now is not actually something happened in a year or 2 or even 10. It's something that you have been doing so long, and until you reach to this point.
Correct. So I don't have a formula, but I want to share the stepping stones and the processes I went through as an example of how one can find their authentic voice. So I'll start with identity. And to me, identity could be divided into 2 parts. So you have an inherited identity, and that's something that is not in your hands. So an inherited identity, in my case, would be that my DNA or my identity and my cultural strands are that I'm part Uzbek, I am part Persian, I am part Ottoman Turkish, and I was born and raised in Germany. So those are cultural threads that determine certain behaviors and certain DNA within me. Then you have what one could call acquired identities. And the acquired identities are then from there on, from the day you are born, everything that you learn, your journey, your experiences, your travel, good days, bad days, things you read, and so on. So I want to use acquired identities in our discussion today as the milestones or the stepping stones that actually each one of them took me closer to finding this voice. And like you said, it took a very long time to come to a point of saying, this is who I am. And some people are maybe lucky, they find that very early in life, they know their purpose, they know who they are. And some it takes much longer, but the idea is it takes a lot of courage to actually continue searching no matter what. So I'll start with growing up, being born in Germany and growing up in Germany as a child, being part, let's say, half Arab or being half Saudi and half Persian. So during this time, the interaction with family, grandmother, going to Tehran, coming from Tehran, and so that you're the whole time inspired or you are exposed to a lot of cultural things. And I come from a family where my grandfather from my mother's side is a textile designer, and we still have textile design factories. So I was always seeing him drawing and so on. And my aunt is also a textile designer and still teaches. So trips to Golistan Palace or to Esfahan, and to the point that they would take my little hand and put them on little tiles, and the turquoise tiles, and say, look at this and look at this. And, and Esfahan, look at the mirrors, look, if you turn on the light, all the reflections. So it's not that I was a child genius and that you at that age, you learn or all that, but it is inherent. You grow up with this, you see it. You are served dishes, you are served food and turquoise dishes. You're served tea in small estacans with patterns. So it's part of that.
Actually, it's building the character.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's building this familiarity to seeing things that they become part of you. Mm-hmm. At the age of 8, I always call this an uprooting for me because it's still traumatic. As a child, when your parents decide to move from one place to another, it is not necessarily that you are informed, especially when we're talking about almost 50 years ago or 40 years ago. So my parents were both living in Germany. My father was going to medical school. And so it was time that his scholarship was over. And so we were moving back to Saudi Arabia. So I was not prepared. I was a child. I only spoke 2 languages. I spoke Farsi and I spoke German. I spoke no Arabic and I spoke no English. And so I find myself in a completely new environment. I don't have any friends and I cannot play outside. It was not Germany anymore. And I found myself in an environment that till now is traumatic for me because people started speaking very loud to me. You know, this is pre-internet where people thought if they speak louder, I would understand.
Okay, because you're a different language.
I can't understand. I can't speak Arabic. I can't speak English. So what are they going to communicate with me? So I would have to say I learned Arabic by force and I learned English through Aramco TV. I learned it from Sesame Street, from, electric company, Mr. Rogers. And I have to be honest, the children, everything looked more like me because the Arabic channel was غصب واحد وغصب اثنين, so there was nothing that really I could
يعني هو للأسف كنا نسميها هيك لأنه إحنا كناش عندنا تكنولوجي بس كانت أيامها very
no choices.
fun. يعني إحنا أنا I remember that these 2 channels were the heaven for me, to be honest. يعني I was born in Riyadh وكانوا كتير يعني خلص إنه 4 p.m. is the cartoon time. كانت بالنسبة لي هي المتعة بصراحة. يعني I still love it. يعني I remember when it started in the morning 10 to 10 يعني the still there. يعني this is what it's building the familiarity. يعني لعله خير.
But different experiences. I was raised in the Eastern Province, so we had Aramco TV, so we had these nice programs. And so the Saudi programs was not what I would watch because I could not understand the language. Yeah. So this is the first milestone from where things started changing. So this made me become much more, from going from this German child that was very extroverted, I became very introverted. And I became much more interested in being inside my books. And all my books are from Germany, and my godmother would send more books. And I became very much interested in creating my own stories, my own fairy tale stories, my own environment, because I could not deal with the environment I was in. And so even family members from my father's family, in order to communicate, would tell me stories. And I might not understand all the words, but storytelling became a very important part of my life for my own sanity.
I have a question if I interrupt you about Germany education and Germany. We always believe the German have one of the most impressive technology and manufacturing, industrial, etc. This is actually crossing like also architect Rasif Badran. I know that he was also raised in Germany. I didn't know that you was raised in Germany, so I just know it. So do you think the education there had really a good impact, positive impact in your background?
Very much. There was a book that came out and said all I needed to learn, I learned in kindergarten. And I would have to say all I needed to learn until I went to high school, I learned in German kindergarten. Wow. The concept of self, the concept of respect, of this child as being an adult, that on Sundays, I was sad that the school was closed because we made things, we went to the factory, we saw how glass was made. And so the concept of how they speak to you on the third person, sie, and not du. And then you find yourself in a Middle Eastern context. And we're not talking about today, we're talking about around 40 years, 45 years ago, where the first day in school I was beaten with rulers on my hand. And I didn't know why. I didn't understand. I just stood there and so a completely different thing. So this was a milestone and a stepping stone of getting much more introverted, reading, and becoming very much involved in storytelling, even telling stories to myself. So I would say fast forward, going through middle school was another, I would say, difficult time. This is the time where Iraq went to war with Iran. And I was from different, I would say judged, not from children because they didn't understand, but I was judged by numerous people of asking me where my mother was from. And I was very proud that I was from that my mother was Persian, because I, as a child of 11 years old or 12 years old, I didn't know what that meant politically. I just knew that there were all these wonderful people in my life that loved me, my grandmother and so on, and who were Persian. So I didn't know why all of a sudden this was a bad thing. And so that was, again, another milestone of trying to understand, to learn that there is a difference between nationalities. I didn't know that there was something like that.
Yeah, okay? You were 11 years. Yes.
I was 11 years. And so to me, that was very normal. So this awareness of that I was different, and this awareness of, but I want to belong. And I think this journey of trying to find an identity, this journey trying to find a voice had already started, because I wanted to belong. But I didn't belong. I wanted to belong. And so there were more and more obstacles in my way. College, university, going to School of Architecture was the beginning that I could actually grow wings. So now I was no longer in a private school. I was in a public university. So there were all kinds of people, different socioeconomic levels. And miraculously, the teaching staff were Turkish. And I don't speak Turkish, but my grandmother is Ottoman Turkish. And so all of a sudden, as a young woman, I related to the teaching staff as if they were my grandmother. So it was like, going home, that after all this time, so now there are people who I can actually relate to. I can relate to the way they look. I can relate to the way they speak. And they related to me, and I became almost like their daughter. And it was in college or at the university that I was maybe introduced formally to Islamic art and architecture, because we had 4 semesters, very intense actually, 4 full semesters of Islamic art and architecture. And at that point, I was already hooked. And I was hooked, Muhammad, for a very particular reason. I looked at this art form that was so strict, geometry, algebra, it was just a very strict art form that became at one point a global art form. Although it was so strict, had so many rules and guidelines, but still it took on a universal form. It went global, that it was applied in Mamluk Egypt, to Mughal India, Ottoman Turkey, Safavid Persia, Al-Andalus. And it took on a completely different identity and look in every single one of these eras and every single one of these countries. And each of them and all of them were magnificent. So
they were inspiring you?
It was inspiring that this art form would go global, that I could identify myself by being Muslim, that all of these empires had something to do with me, that I could claim rights to all of them. I belong to Ottoman Turkey. I belong to Mughal India. I belong to Al-Andalus. I can claim them as mine. But the most intriguing part was, the more I started learning about the individual people, if it was Sinan, or if it was Umar al-Khayyam, or all of the Abdullah bin Muqaffa as a writer, and Hafiz and Saadi, I realized, Muhammad, none of them were Arabs. And that was really, as a child, or I'd say as a young woman, that was a revelation for me, that they were creators, they were artists, and they were not necessarily all Muslim, they were not necessarily all Arab, and they also worked together. So in Al-Andalus, it was the Arabs and the Muslims, the Christians and the Jews that worked together to create all this. It became so clear to me that all these empires existed because they were able to build on existing cultures, on existing civilizations. So they brought their identity, but built on existing civilizations to make something more amazing and much more. And so they were open-minded to learning from others. They were open-minded to intermarry. They were open-minded to learn and teach. And so this all was so attractive to me that I wanted to learn more. So that was really a very important and very big step for me, that I found myself part of these people, that I belonged to these people. And what also intrigued me is that maybe sometimes we don't think about this today. If it wasn't for these people, we would not have a culture today. We would not have cultural heritage. We could not go to Topkapi. We could not see the Taj Mahal. We would not have any of that if it wasn't for them. Culture and heritage is formed by the artists and by the architects and by the artisans, and not by politicians and not by the religious.
Okay, to learn more about, I believe the points that you mentioned actually all of them are leading that we have to read more about historical events in the past, all the cultures and empires and countries around us, which actually can lead us to understand more about architects and about the events that they had and so on. It can lead any creative designer or architect to have that style or creativity that he can find, I can say. And or do you think that it will continue building through the practical experience in the work itself?
I look, people go through, let's say, similar journeys, but it doesn't mean they come out with the same outcome.
Exactly.
And this is just my own personal journey, but does that not mean that, but it still means that we, as, let's say, if you are Muslim, I think if you're from any religion anyway, that history is a very important part of us learning about ourselves. And I think being from such an amazing civilization, we need to learn about this, given that history is always written by the conquerors. So we don't have all the facts. And in the book by Michael Hamilton, he talks about lost history, because it is lost to us. And we have to remember that all these civilizations were built on different languages. Mughal India was India, Andalus was Spanish, and so on. So they were also not all documented in one language that we can all read. So searching and reading, yes, is a challenge. It's difficult, but it also has to do with interest. We all should have some base of understanding what history is. But this was just my personal interest. And it was a personal interest because I was looking for identity. And I'm still looking for identity. It was very hard growing up in an environment at that time, and not so now, at that time, when coming from different cultural strands was not hip. It was not trendy, and it was not what people call now exotic. It was not exotic. I'm lucky that throughout my career, at one point or another, one strand or another became exotic or trendy. You know, with the boom in Turkey, my Ottoman Turkish part became trendy. So, but it was hard. It was hard, but I learned a lot of things. So then moving forward, finishing college, going to the US. The US is again another very important milestone. My family all live in the US. My mother's family, a lot of them, because after the revolution, they live in the US, they live in London, they live in Australia. So going back and forth to the US was almost every other summer. But going there to school was again a very important milestone. It was the milestone where I grew wings further. My wings grew wider with being allowed to getting the ability to express freely. The Americans are very vocal, and I was already vocal for sure, but I was very introverted. So America allowed me, by seeing me as an individual, by seeing me as being exotic, by seeing that I have all these strands, because they are like that. They're a melting pot of all these cultures. So they helped me to express. They helped me to stop writing in creative writing or in research methods, writing apologetic letters. I was called in to ask, why would I write in such an apologetic way? And it was very much an Arabic way of writing, that you're almost asking for permission, you're apologizing while you are writing in a way. And they wanted me to be more assertive and to see what I think, not what they want to hear, but what I think, what I want to say. And so I was always trying to be politically correct, because people can tell you that, Maysir, you should not write that and you should not say that. And so it was actually America that gave me the chance in school to express myself. Again, a milestone. A milestone was when we were graduating our master program. And everyone with me were all foreigners. There were people from Korea, China, Greece, New York, and so on. And I remember this very clearly. The head of graduate studies had asked us to write 3 things that would differentiate us as designers if we left school. And so at the time I was 26. So we all wrote things that I am creative and I am this and that. And so she told us all, but this is you and everybody else. What differentiates you? And it was really a difficult exercise. And so then she said, I'll give you all a hint. Write down 3 things that you believe would hinder you from moving forward, that would be a burden or would hinder you on your way to growing as a designer. So again, this is we're talking about, the early 90s. So I wrote, I'm a woman. I wrote the 3 things that I believed would hinder me from succeeding in my field. I'm a woman, and I'm Arab, and I'm Muslim.
Yes,
so,
I'm with you.
Okay.
No, I'm okay.
And then everyone wrote their own things, the things that were negative, the things, because that's what she wanted us to write. And she said, these 3, Sonia, these 3 embrace. This is what makes you unique.
Mm-hmm.
And so that became a milestone of making peace with it, rather than seeing this as an obstacle, that I am a woman and that I'm Muslim and that I'm Arab. So when it was like she gifted me something that I thought was a negative. And so it became really important. I took those and they became actually my tool. They became my identity, and they became something that I fought for, not only in not only helping myself, but also promoting others.
So they became the base for the character that you are trying to reach.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So again, fast forward, I eventually make my way to Jeddah. Mm-hmm. And in Jeddah, I was given the task to co-found the interior design department in Dar al-Hikmah. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I was 28. I still don't know how I did this at 28, but I did this. So at 28, I co-founded the interior design department, content, lectures, everything.
MashaAllah.
And this was an amazing time, because my girls, who are still, I'm in contact with, they're no longer little children, but they are to me still my girls. They taught me. It is the girls who taught me how to teach. Because I was 28 and they were 18. So yes, there was 10 years between us, but in fact, we were almost the same age. And so they were the most amazing students, and they taught me how to teach. And that became another milestone, that I was actually very good in teaching. They taught me, until now are in touch with me, until and still tell me how I changed their lives. And so that became another very important milestone that point in my life that I took with me in always wanting to teach. And I always teach, and I still teach, and I still mentor, and I drive my team nuts. Really, I drive them nuts because they don't want to learn all these things, but I force them to teach. You have to see this film. We're going to go to a movie night. You have to read this. You have to take this course. I'll pay for it. Take it. It's on, so I'm still that. I'm still a bully. I still want everyone to learn. And I want to empower all these women because I want them to be independent. I want them to be able to stand on their own and be their own person and to excel and to reach their full potential.
I believe we can see a lot of your students that we know in the market now are really good competitors.
but that makes you a fantastic teacher if you would go to an office
MashaAllah,
of another from someone you have taught and she's better than you. That is the most amazing thing, because then you've done your job, then you've done something right. If you always remain to be the only one who's any good and everyone is mediocre, that makes you a very mediocre teacher. You want them to be better than you. That's the whole point. So moving fast forward. Okay, again, another step. With all the drama details, I started my office in 2001 in the Eastern Province, Saudi Arabia. And it was, again, a very hard time. So we were not licensed. Nobody would give you an office. You're not supposed to mix, but against all odds, with a lot of love and a lot of hopefulness, a lot of ambition, I opened this office. And for the first few years, I was trying to dab into different styles, because that's what I got, So this guy wants an apartment in Lebanon, and this person wants this. And as a designer, and because I like research, and so I could take on the persona of every style, and I could perfect it. And we also designed the Saudi embassy in Switzerland. That was a revival of a Louis XVI interior with the monumental care on board. So it had to be sound. It had to fit into that style. But was it me? It wasn't. Did it resonate with me? Did I identify with this? I didn't. So miraculously, not out of la shape, but miraculously, I was able, after begging and pleading and trying and being denied for 3 years, finally the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Riyadh got, I think, tired of me, trying so hard, and said, okay, yalla, come, we'll see you. And I have to say that I was also lucky, because I was working with a friend of mine in Qatar, with the Qatari ambassador in Italy. And he was really a lovely man. And he also recommended me. So me pushing from here and he recommending me. So finally they gave me an appointment, because they just, I think, wanted to get rid of me. So they finally gave me this appointment.
And actually, this is just to highlight technically how this works in business-wise. And giving up and submitting your offer or your design to a client, a lot of designers, actually, they could just send it once or twice and khalas, they don't follow up. So following up, or let's say nagging on clients to get the project.
Hustle. It's called a hustle.
Yeah, the client will understand that you are really the one who can do it. And this is the technical point about it.
So I hustled, but I hustled in a good way. I cared, and when I called them, I would just always tell them, I just want an appointment. I just want to come and talk. And so I didn't want anything, And so when I went, I finally got my appointment, and I got the biggest gift that I would have ever gotten. And it goes as follows. His Royal Highness, Prince Saud al-Faisal, may he rest in peace, Allah yarhamu. He was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and he was a visionary. He was the most elegant man I've ever met in my life, and still. And he was so ahead of his time, really so ahead of his time. And so his vision for the embassies was not cultivating a Saudi identity or an Arab identity or a MENA region identity. His vision was of an Islamic identity, an Islamic architectural identity, because he believed that Saudi Arabia housing or being the center of the two holy mosques should promote and should reflect an Islamic persona. And so it was like, hallelujah, it was like, for me, like this dream that came through, because I've been wanting to sell this to my clients, but they didn't want that. It was too early, Muhammad. This was, you know, this is not at a time of culture and museums, and this was very new. This was already wanting to do something with Islamic art, and this was not the direction. This is at Saudi Arabia. We were in this time in the 80s and early 90s of still classical. This was really not
very
trendy.
Classic, yeah.
This was not about identity, and it had to do that we didn't have the internet. We were not open to what that actually means. And so him giving me that chance, and so this became the brief. The brief became that in every country that we design, we have to build an Islamic art story that was relevant to the context. If you're designing an embassy in Iran, what would be our story? If we're designing in Poland, what would be our story? And it gave me the chance. It was like a funded research, you know, like that you want to do this research for yourself, but as designers, we have to live. So this, for me, every project with the ministry became a funded research. Like I'm a research institute. I get paid by a sponsor or by, I get paid a certain amount that now you can go and you can research what you want to research. And to the point that when I would do my beautiful presentations, sometimes short films, you know, different things, that Amir Khalid bin Saud would always say, Wallah, you do this for yourself. This is for nobody but yourself. And it was wonderful. Look, it was wonderful to be given that opportunity. Was it an easy thing to do? Because you're not just dealing with the few top people, and you know, you're dealing with everybody else. And it was, again, very painful. And it was a challenge because you are dealing with government entities, that every embassy has different standards. We're in different countries, different contractors, architects, the standards, drawings, and so on. But what I loved about them was that when I would go, I actually represented my country on every one of these projects. So I became somehow so aware about how I conduct myself, what I say, and what was my voice. What was I portraying almost as a cultural ambassador when I'm in Switzerland? Because they would not know anything about Saudi Arabia or about Saudi women.
May I interrupt? Do you think you was able to align your style of, or let's say your authentic voice or your identity with the country's style?
I think one of the most successful projects was our Saudi embassy in residence in Poland and Warsaw. It won an award in 2017, an international design award. It was designed in parallel with the direction of Poland. So Warsaw, Poland, after World War II, had 100% destruction, and they rebuilt their city to the 16th century, celebrating Chopin, celebrating that style of that period, mannerism and the Rococo and the Renaissance and so on. So I looked at the equivalent in the 16th century of the Islamic world. And it was the golden age for the world in general. And so you have Ottoman Turkey and you have Safavid Persia. And we looked at the most celebrated form of art in each. So in Ottoman Turkey, you had the Iznik tiles, and in the Safavid Persia, you had the miniatures and munamnamat. And so we started extracting and breaking down, not in copying what was there, because if these people were alive today, they would not do what they were doing, but trying to understand the ideology of what is the ideology of a munamnamat. Their visual biographies, they encompass all the different elements of Islamic art, the Iznik tiles, the colors, what do the colors represent? And so a lot of research went into that, to creating a contemporary interior that was very museum-like, very serene, and it had all these elements. And Munamnamat influenced the space planning. All our beautiful panels and lacquers panels were influenced by the Iznik tiles. And it was heartfelt. It was one of the best projects that was ever designed, and for the ministry and for me, and won an award. So the authentic voice, I would say, with the Poland project, 2006 was done. It was this is it, because it was, and it took a long time to build. So it went on hold, and then it was rebuilt. So it actually was, we opened this in 2014.
Wow.
And yeah, it started to be built in 2012. And then 2014, it was finished. And
so it's taken 12 years.
It was on hold. They didn't have the rights to the land and things like that. But when it finally opened, Muhammad, for me, it manifested exactly what I wanted. This is who I am. And it looked like a museum interior. It was very minimal, very serene, and everybody loved it, no matter who came, from what walk of life, what background, and everybody loved this. And it was so interesting that this kind of style would resonate with so many people. And so it was 2006, that was almost where I found my voice and design. But I didn't get to see it live until 2014. So now I'm trying to figure out okay, one of the things that was constant throughout all of this, from starting from childhood all the way, let's say, to today, one thing was constant, is my personal love for museums. And this was something very interesting, because even my parents tell me that from a very young age, where children don't like going to museums, that I would stay a very long time fixated on one item. And it was interesting that when I got older and I was able to articulate what it was, I was moved from place to place. Being uprooted from the beginning was hard for me, and not being able to belong somewhere was hard for me. So I saw that as a form of chaos, really, and an instability. Maybe within myself, not within the family life, and everything was organized. I think within myself. When I went to museums, everything was organized. Everything is organized, structured. There's like a manual how you go in. Everything is clear, and actually, it's safe.
Yeah, the passion about museums always push you. I mean, I think to do research, because museum itself is having understanding about researchers. So I believe each project you have been doing, you were doing a research about why you do it, which is actually a good step for all designers and creators to understand technically how to start a project, not just to adapt the client style directly without studying it, without reviewing it or research it, to know where to lead the design of the project.
Museums are obviously a fantastic place that you can learn so many things, from the smallest thing of circulation, material, display, lighting, signage, all of that. What intrigued me with museums, and this is, again, people can go through certain experiences, but it doesn't mean they take with them the outcome. People have different outcomes. My outcome was, because I continuously am searching for identity, I'm continuously searching for answers, continuously asking, where do I belong? How do I belong? Why can't I belong? Was that when I would go to all these museums and I would see one artifact, it is a fragment. It is not the whole picture, it's a fragment. And so I would see myself almost within that one tile, that this is an incomplete story. You see a fragment, it says that this tile is from Konya, from a cornerstone of a madrasa. And it says something on there, and then you wonder about this tile, you wonder about the building, who built that? Where was this? Why was that? Who took that? Why is it in this museum? What is the story of this place? And I relate that very much to myself, because as human beings, if you think about this, if I asked you, like when you were 6 years old and you remember your birthday, you cannot remember everything. You remember fragments. You remember the cake. Maybe you fell off the chair, the candle. You didn't like the gift, you know. So you remember fragments. And so I had one client telling me that what she likes about my work is that I create spaces that are depository of memories. So my spaces are not complete. They always also look like museums. And I think the reason they look like museums is because we don't have any Islamic reference to houses, to things you live in. We have Islamic monuments of a tomb or a mosque, but we don't have any reference to actual houses. There's a palace like Topkapi or Yildiz Palace. So the only reference we actually have to Islamic art are museums. So I think unconsciously, they became my reference, they became my identity. So whatever I design unconsciously looks like a museum. That's my reference to Islamic architecture or to Islamic art. But it all, so go ahead.
There's a question that's raising is identity adaptable or only built?
What does that mean? What do you mean?
Okay, it's inherited only, or do you think it can be built? I mean, it can be adaptable, like how, let's say, how German during Nazis, Hitler was trying to adapt full different criteria of everything. So then they back again to everything back after 40 years or 30 years old. So is the identity being adaptable? Is it possible to be adapted or no?
I'm sure it is, because how can I say, we talked about this in the beginning. So identity is defined into two parts of inherited and acquired. Okay. So acquired has to do with everything. It has to do that you as a person are changing according to your experiences. But I also believe that the core of you will always remain the same. And you hear this even from the family when they would say, for example, they'd always say to me that since I was a child, I talked too much, you know, and okay, that's very inherent to me as an identity. It would not change. It also has to do that I think as human beings, we are very much adapted to change. We are, and now because we got so set into our ways that we don't want to change, but now even with this COVID that has just happened, we're doing things online, we're getting things, delivered. So we are trying, we adapt to change. The question is, at what point, what is too much? What is too far that we kind of lose ourselves? And then you see people after many years of maybe living in another country that they want to go home and they don't know where is home, because in the core of us, there is always this wanting to go home and wanting to belong. I think you will always yearn for that. You'll always look for that. And for me, and this is just my own story, so that I really needed that for me. And I think for me, it was like going a full circle, because I came right back where I started to realize that I don't need to belong. Because if, in fact, as human beings, we are kind of eternal refugees, because this is not our ending place. So we're not supposed to stay on earth forever, because we're supposed to go to another life. So in fact, we don't belong to anywhere. And like somebody told me that you're not a tree. I'm not supposed to have roots and stay in one place. And so I've come to the conclusion that I am global. And so as my faith is very important to me, and it is my identity, being Muslim is my identity, Islamic art and the Islamic empires became my voice. And so in my work, what I try to do, I would like that the story and this history that is lost, and it's lost to us because it's not documented by the West, and it's not their job to document it, but it's lost history, like the book I'm telling you about Michael Hamilton. He talks about the lost history, which is the Islamic history. I would like to bring that to the table. I would like to bring that back to life. So it's no longer this old, dusty, I would say English thing to, like in history books, but actually bring that to life and to make it accessible and to simplify the stories. If it's a color, if it's a pattern, and to have bite sizes to inform a younger generation. And it's interesting that if I look on my Instagram and my following, that they're mainly young people. I mean, they're between 25 and 35. And the reason I started this Instagram was I wanted to log, I wanted to blog, I wanted to take my daily, it's like a daily journal, to actually write all these things. And it's very vulnerable. I didn't even know people cared to read this, because people like to flick through pictures, but I'm always amazed that people actually read my posts. They're very long, because I go through really, really bad days, and I go through really good days and inspiring days and traumatic days. But I'm also, because of my experiences as a child, as a personality, I'm a very vulnerable personality. So I know not everybody has the ability to also turn themselves inside out and to reveal all their pain. And it's not because I am a courageous person that I do that. I was just maybe trained like that, or I think I just became like that. So if I am frustrated with something and I feel something and something reminds me of my grandmother or of that, I will write it, and I blog about this all the time. And I think this vulnerability and being honest and revealing who you really are into what you do is what is an authentic voice. So I can end it here as a conclusion to say that I care about sharing our stories and why I do it after this journey, that our work is about sharing our story, about sharing our history and making it accessible. And I just had a teenager last week send me a direct message. I don't know how old she is, but I looked at her picture because she looks very young. She looks like a teenager. And she said, Miss Sonia, I love following you. I read all your posts because you make Islamic art sexy. And so it was so cute. It was so cute.
Okay.
And, she's a teenager. And I thought, if I am 53 and I can communicate with someone who's maybe 16, then I must be doing something right. That I can make something that is dusty and maybe difficult and heavy interesting to someone who's 16, regardless of what she calls it, then maybe I should continue, because they have the right to know, and they have to know where we come from. What we do with it, Muhammad, is a whole nother story. But we need to know these amazing stories. We need to know where we come from. We need to know why the color turquoise was turquoise. We need to know why that was used. We need to know why this bottle green appeared. Where does it come from? Because they're just stories. And we are, as a people, we are a vocal tradition. We are not Prince Charles and we write diaries and journals and do watercolors. We've always been a vocal tradition. We transmitted the Quran vocally. We transmitted poetry vocally. And now that we have all these gadgets, and which are so supposedly called social media, which are so antisocial, is we stop talking to each other.
Yes.
Yeah. So as a conclusion, finding your authentic voice. It is not something that is academic, but I looked at some academic, let's say some academic platforms explaining what an authentic voice is and how to find that. I'm not saying that this is a solution, but it's always good if you search and look for these things. It gives you a base to start from, okay? So authentic voice, this is similar to what I said. Reveal yourself, that you show your true identity to permeate your work, that you have sincerity, honesty, originality, and uniqueness. Now this, that you reveal yourself, is not enough. Now, let's say you come from a Spanish background, your grandfather was, I don't know, in Al-Andalus, and it's all amazing. But you as a person are not interesting. And you're not smart, and you're not ambitious, and you're not curious, and you're not skilled. You don't have the skill. So then the whole exercise is useless. So to have the authentic voice, one, to be vulnerable, to allow yourself to reveal yourself of who you are, who you really are. Then combine that I, who you are, which I posted this morning, the other content that your audience will be attracted to, that you're interesting, you're clever, you're skilled, you're alive, you're true and authentic. Now, for steps to get there would be, I looked at this again, it's very academic, but I understand what they mean. To practice silence and stillness. If we're hurrying from one thing to another, or there's another project, okay, they want to do a supermarket, and then this one, and it doesn't matter, okay, inshallah later, because they want to do this classical thing, and then here they want to do an expansion, and here's a car showroom, and you think, but just stop. You don't need to do all these things. Be a little bit quiet. It's okay. You can lose some money. It's about risk. Finding yourself is risky. You will have to eventually say no to projects. You might not eat for a whole year.
The key is saying no. This is
you have to say no.
Yeah.
And you have to believe, and I have to say this in Arabic, you have to believe, or you have to have faith in the God who brought you this far. I think we all forget about that, including myself. We go through anxiety. We say, oh my God, what are we going to do? There is a recession. We're going to lose money. I have to let my people go and all that. But we forget that a Rabb that brought us here, Rabb li jabani lighayat hina. Why do we assume that he's going to let us go? إنه حيتخلى عننا الحين. This has to do with faith. And it also has to do with to be honest with yourself. And so I think as designers, we are so focused on the business part of creativity. And these two don't go together. One is authentic and one is honest. One is about positive change. One is about purpose. It's about value. And business is about something completely different. That's all about targets and money and how much can you make. And so these two, they don't go together. And so to practice silence, and I think now of what we're going through is a really good time to reevaluate. Am I really happy with what I do? Why am I not happy? And to be honest, even if that means you change a career, as designers, as architects, we are trained with all the right skills. I mean, consultancy like JP Morgan, and hire architects because they're structured, they're organized, they think out of the box, they have the ability to analyze and to research. So if that purpose, if you stop having purpose, if what you do no longer has value, no longer has purpose, change. We are creatures of change. We are, as designers, we are the ones who are supposed to create positive change. And if we can't change ourselves, why do we expect that from others? And then number 2 is seek support. It doesn't help if you're going to be in an environment that is not conducive with your dream. You have a dream, you want to go somewhere, and nobody has the right to shut down that dream. And I've seen too much of it in my own lifetime, in my own career, where every step was like, no, you cannot do that. No, you're going to fail. Why do you need to do this? Why do you need to be different? Why can't you be like everybody else? You know, so you need to be, at my time that didn't exist. Find people who think similarly, people who have the same direction if you want to fulfill that dream. Talk to them, be nurtured. Don't surround yourself with people who are negative. We need mirrors to reflect off. And if that mirror no longer serves its purpose, we need to find a new mirror. Number 3 is maybe one of the most important, is to be brave. It is really difficult. And it's called Mission Impossible, right? So it is difficult. Nobody gets anywhere without having to risk a lot. Really to risk a lot. You lose. There were numerous occasions throughout the way, let's say at the time when I started the office, where women were not licensed. I was in court trying to license women for 4 years. Would you ask me to do this now? I would not do it again. It is hard, but you have to find something that makes you get up in the morning. That's something you believe in. And this is where we talk about to find a purpose. And you find that purpose.
It will motivate you.
It is soul driven. If your soul drives that purpose, then you will never stop. You will fall and you will cry and you will feel like it's the end of the world. But then you wake up the next day and you want to continue. And I would say that I'm at this point lucky to have found an authentic voice. But Muhammad, does everybody want to buy this? No. Would I would go from for certain years where we would have, let's say, 5 projects in one time, and a year when we only have 1. And where I only have 1 and I can barely cover costs, does that mean I'm going to do 3 car showrooms? No.
Yeah,
no.
This is where actually the business starts impacting what we are doing.
But we are not business people. We are not in the stock exchange. And I think I had someone, a young designer, just recently asked me that. She said, did you have a business plan? I told her that I was always an artist. I have no idea what the business plan is. But how I had opened the office, because at that time, just opening an office was such a challenge to even do that. My business plan, Muhammad, was as follows. Every few years, I would send out my CV and see what my market value was. And so if people were willing to pay me, for example, 30,000 Riyal a month, I would calculate if I can make 30,000 Riyal a month, but work for myself, then I would be very happy.
Then that's fine.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
Because at the end, what I wanted to create was create value. I wanted to bring legitimacy to our profession, to bring credibility. After working with the Saudi Ministry of Foreign Affairs and having done a good job, and we won an award for Bern, we won an award for Poland, that the Saudi Ministry of Foreign Affairs started hiring other young Saudi designers because I built credibility. And when in our market today, when I see Saudi designers, it doesn't matter if they're architects or interior designers, male or female, and they do a bad job, it really upsets me, because they are the ones that then plant a wrong seed and leave a wrong impression, because I worked really hard to put in place credibility for Saudi designers, and always representing my country at the highest level of professionalism. And so this concept of understanding, am I running a business? Am I a business person? Or am I an architect and a designer? And always to remember that as designers and as architects, our first and ultimate job is, and responsibility is, one, to bring purpose to what we do and to bring value. And that if you create value, that is any way of success. And success will bring money. But
and clients will come, yeah, exactly.
But the money cannot be the driving force. And as designers and as a young country, our job also is to learn that we are credible, we understand, we are skilled, that we continuously research, we continuously learn, we continue to grow, and to inform our clients. One of the biggest gifts I have is when I work with my clients, that by the time we finish a project, I learn so much more and they learn so much more. And it's not a business deal. It has very short legs. And so this building credibility, having an authentic voice, Muhammad, is what you would say in Arabic, like Riyal al-Fidda. Because there will always be new designers, there will be new trends, there will be all that. how will you be relevant? If you want to think about it as a business model, and it's not, but if you want to think, how are you going to be relevant 10 years from now, 15 years from now, when I tell you that all my clients are between the age of 30 and 35, don't have older clients anymore. And so it makes me happy because they must see me relevant, although I am much older than them. Why would they not go with a younger designer that would understand them? And I think the concept of authenticity, the concept of being true and being honest and having a voice is what building trust is what will drive clients, but it's not the goal. So yeah, so this is it.
It's done. The value is the most
the value you bring, and
exactly,
that you're doing something for your country, you're doing something for your clients, and it's not
it will bring clients.
It will bring clients. It's indirectly, it is almost like passive marketing. If you want to say that in our market today, but I never thought about it like this. But you know, when people recommend you just for the value that you bring as a person, then you've done something right.
طيب.
Because
يعني,
so I'm done.
I'm sorry that always the time is running. طيب احنا we have a couple of questions and عندنا مداخلة مع المهندس عبد الفتاح. المهندس عبد الفتاح تحسنا شوية بس آخر شيء حندخلك معنا وبعدين نخلص اللقاء. في عندنا بس a couple of questions and I find them important. One of them is we need a list of recommended books that can help us, and if you can just send it to me the list, and I will email it to everyone by email if possible. And the second question is everyone is asking, actually two people asked me about the Arabic language of this talk, and at the end of this talk we will send a survey where we want to hear from anyone who wants Arabic version of this talk. Eventually we decided to have another talk coming out, actually a couple of talks during Ramadan. So we want everyone to suggest topics that Engineer Sonia and me, and we will host a couple of other profiles to join us and discuss a certain topic that you will suggest. And we can go in Arabic or English.
I want to apologize to everyone about speaking in English today. The purpose of actually making this talk in English was that I have an international following, and a lot of people who wanted to be part of this talk are all the way from South Africa to Hawaii to India, and so they don't obviously speak Arabic. But Muhammad and I talked about this morning, that if there is a request and if people do want that, we could organize for another session with the same topic or other topics in Arabic. Absolutely no problem. This is my first talk on a webinar. I don't know how good I am on the webinar, and but it's a first trial, and if this works out well and people benefit from that, I'm happy to continue.
I think it has been a year we are trying to have you with us. يعني سبحان الله ما صار الكورونا ونجبرنا نعمل
اونلاين. زبط الموضوع.
خلينا ندخل معنا المهندس عبد الفتاح وننهي معنا اللقاء فيه. مرحبا مهندس.
الو
يا هلا عبد الفتاح. مهندس انا عملتك ميوت، انت عملت ميوت.
انا ميوت ناو. اهلا مهندس محمد.
الله يحييك.
مساء الخير وكل عام وانتم بخير، انت
والصحه والسلامه.
عزيزه المهندسه سونيا والله جميله، ويعني انظر ان المهندسه سونيا بعد زميله يعني عمر منا.
Absolutely.
Like always very inspiring.
الله يخليك.
وقاعد نستمع بشغف، ويعني وتجربة جميلة، وقد أكون أنا من أكثر الناس مطلعين عليها وأعرف عن الصعاب اللي مريتي فيها.
الله يخليك. Absolutely.
وأنا متأكد إن يعني جزء كبير من تجربتك، أو على الأقل رحلة حياتك المهنية، ما تعرضت لها، ولكنها very challenging و inspiring لليونج generation. قد ما يكون عندي أسئلة ليش أكثر منها مداخلات يعني لإثارة بس المتعة والlessons to learn. وأنت يعني تعرضتي بعنوان المحاضرة واللي أنا يمكن أسميها different perspective. normally أقول اللي هو to follow your passion، يعني architect or professional يعني if he follow his heart not only brain ويوظف هالمعنى في عمله ويضع لنفسه أهداف ذاتية لتحقيقها، مثل ما قلتي بحسن الاختيار، يعني تحمل صعاب to say no for something he does not like. أكيد إن إحنا في النهاية يعني ما نصلي إلا الطلب بالغفران، يعني نشتغل في business we want to cover our pennies، ويمكن بعدين نتعرج على سؤال كم السي في حقك اليوم يعني وصلت حتى تعرفين you will stop ولا you will carry on.
Yes.
أوكي، بس نرجع نقول بالنسبة للي هو يعني البنات وين تشوفين؟ أنا أرى يمكن اليوم بكل أمانة يعني بعد رحلة يعني رحلة مهنية صعبة وأكثر من 30 سنة، إن اليوم يمكن أفضل فترة أنا أراها في الحراك المهني اللي قاعد يصير. يعني هي an opportunity for the young generation أولاً، opportunity من عدة محاور. من محور زيادة الأويرنس. المجتمع اليوم متعلم، وانت لما ذكرتي ان حتى من your client انهم young generation، انا اظن مو فقط ان انت نعم يعني قدرتي تتواصلين وياهم وتتناغمين معهم فكريا، لكن بالاضافه ان هم ازدادوا وعي، يبحثون عن الفاليو against what they pay. عندنا اليوم مجتمع واعي. الجنريشن is led او country is led by big generation، كلهم راحوا ودرسوا برا وتعلموا. هذول قاعد يشتغلون two way system، two way إن هم كمتلقين هم واعين، واليوم كممارسين ومساهمين يعني هم واعين ومميزين. وأنا سعيد إن اليوم أنا وأنت يعني في جيلنا قاعد نلحق إن نتفاعل ونتقاطع مع مجموعة كبيرة. يعني يمكن من 20 سنة لو كنا نبحث عن عدد من المهنيين المعماريين المصممات الآن بالمئات، والحراك جميل والتولز تغيرت سونيا. يعني يمكن أنا في جيلنا صرفنا أموال طائلة لاقتناء كتب، سافرنا لاقتنائها، تحملنا حتى وزنها. اليوم بضغطة زر في البنترست في الجوجل في هذا they can do a lot of search.
صحيح.
where my in my opinion يعني وانا اشوف هالحراك الجميل والقدرات الجميله والتولز اللي الفعاله جدا للاستخدام where they need to just يعني listen from people like us and they have to be patient to know ان مهما كان عندهم كل هذولي there is a long way of مثل ما انت تفضلتي كل مشروع تنتهين فيه انت والكلاينت تتعلمين، نتعلم احنا كل يوم. فهذا الحراك التنفيذي اللي تمر فيه في المشاريع every project is different, every site is different, every exercise is a learning. وهذه ما تجي لانك انت talent ولا تجي لان عندك tools. You have to grow through the process. انك to be patient, to be passionate of what you do, and then you have a vision and milestone for goals to achieve. يعني انت يعني الواحد يقول الدولة كانت تحط اللي هو الخطط الخمسية، انا اقول لنا كمهنيين يجب ان نقول where I am in 3-5 years, what I want to do, where I want to be. اليوم الحراك حتى على مستوى التنمية والله الحمد البلد فيها great opportunities, great يعني على مستوى دخول استشاريين كبار. الاستشاريين المحليين اليوم صار عندهم تجربة ينقلونها. المشاريع اللي تطرحها الدولة يتمنى كل الشركات biggest firm international architecture وانتير ديزاينر في العالم اليوم يدخلون يكونون جزء منها. أنا أقول هاي فرصة للشباب وإن شاء الله يأخذون استحقاقهم، بس يجب أن they work hard. hard بمعنى hard مثل ما قلتي، يعني sometimes احنا في العمارة يعني تذكريني في أنا أول ما تزوجت في بداية حياتي وأنا يعني كنت new grad، فكنت أقول زوجتي يعني you have to know أنت الضرة الثانية ما أنت الزوجة الأولى. she was kind of wondering why. كنت أقول لها ترى أنا اخترت الاركتكتشر قبل ما اختارت، فلا تخلينها منافسة لك، يعني please be good second wife. وأكيد يعني إذا كان حولك من يساعد. أنا في مايلستون قد أنا أعرفها أكثر من الآخرين وقد ما أتاح لي الفرصة اليوم في جانب من حتى your team معاك دانيال is a very good talent partner, associate partner. أنا I'm sure اللي هو أضاف بعد مايلستون، وهذا حيعطي قوة للفريق، وtogether يعني I know you إن شاء الله يعني تأخذون الاستحقاق وأكثر.
نشكرك مهندس عبد الفتاح ومهندسة سونيا. احنا الوقت we already passed 20 minutes more على الوقت. في ناس ما شاء الله ظلت معانا.
أنا ما عندي مشكلة. People want to ask questions, we can answer their questions.
We can pick 2 questions على أساس.
سونيا بس أنا إذا تسمحوا لي أنا بس السؤال سونيا أبغى تقول لها للشباب يعني do they all have to be يعني practicing أمام كل هالopportunity؟ شنو رسالتها للشباب، جيل الشباب أولاد وبنات so they can يعني after 10 20 years what do they need to be؟
شكرا لك.
or to do يعني. أوكي شكرا.
يلا الله يحييك. طيب إذا بتحبي تجاوبي سؤال المهندس عبد الفتاح while I'm surfing the questions لأنه ما شاء الله إجانا كذا سؤال وتفضلي.
I was in a congress, or let's say it's called Design Leadership Network, and there are leaders in design, and so I was invited to be part of this Design Leadership Network, and I was in London in November, and so there was a fantastic presentation of a consultant who was taking us through what does the world look like in the next 10 years. So in order for designers to know what to expect and how to adapt to that change. It was absolutely fascinating based on data, on research, on ila akhiri. But the presentation was not about saying, is this a good or bad thing? It was about what we're to experience. And so they talked about how the future obviously is with the majority of the millenniums, for sure. And how is this different from al-jil haqqana nahna? There was one very important difference. This coming generation has no interest in owning anything. Where in our generation, our parents encouraged us and pushed us to buy property and to invest and to have a retirement fund. The next generation is going to be a generation where they want to have experiences. They don't need to own a car because there are facilities that you can get a car over your app or Uber or whatever. You don't have to buy houses. You don't have to buy art. There are galleries now in London and others that you can actually, they loan art to you. So the expectations of what design is, if design is providing positive change, if it's about creating better environments, if it's going to be about experiences, so our focus would be completely different. It will not be old style of let's do interior design and buy things and buy a house. And so I think one has to adapt to to be aware. I think this is the difference. I think, yes, the younger generation, they're much more digital savvy, they're more tech savvy, they have everything. But one thing is, if you are not familiar with research methods of how we did things, you would not know what you're searching for. You might have all the sites and all that, but you don't know what you're searching for. So I think for this generation to be up to date, not with design trends that are physical, that are the trend is blue or the trend is this, but to be aware with the changing needs of society, the changing needs of design. Are we going into more biophysical? Are we going into more, I don't know, into marine, but whatever it is, but to be aware of the changing trends and needs and building and building the talents and the skills to be able to, to answer those needs. So according to these statistics, in the next 10 to 15 years, all the design that we are going to do has to do with experiences. There was a time when people talked about sustainability. Then there was this trend thing that was about cultural identity. But everything, if you notice now, if it's ads, if it's Coca-Cola, if it's whatever, they always talk about experiences. And this is where the investment is. And you see that even with Saudi Arabia, with all the entertainment, they're selling you experiences. People want experiences. So I'm not saying what we should do, but I believe as a younger generation, we always have to be attuned to the changing trends, and they're getting faster, so that what we do is relevant. This would be a message also to universities and to teaching. Why are we teaching things that are completely irrelevant in the next 3 years? So that would be my message, to be attuned to the changing trends and to be prepared for them. That would be my advice.
Thank you كتير. وكان أخذنا وقت أكتر. إحنا بدينا ما شاء الله كان معنا أكتر من 200 شخص وضل معنا 100 لآخر لحظة. يعني نشكر الجميع وكل عام وانتم بخير. إحنا it's recorded and they will have it accessible على اليوتيوب. We will send an email fee survey, and you can have points and suggestions for coming talks and what we can develop, and even if you have feedback, bad or good, we need to hear it so we can enhance it. شكرا لك مهندسة سونيا، وإن شاء الله نراكم قريبا بإذن الله.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye bye.